what's the purpose of teaching evolution to start with? It's really important. We never talk about that. Why teach it? Well, why teach anything? The idea is to learn, and you're not only learning things, you have to learn how to think. And what I see most wrong about evolutionary teaching is that it stifles thinking. Because here's the basic problem of evolution as currently constructed. Evolutionary teaching is like saying, hi, I have this checkbook. There are, say, 100 checks, but I'm only going to select 4 of them and say that these 4 checks were written every single month for all months. Okay, well, then you've not accounted for the other 96 checks. So your bank balance is off. And you haven't accounted for the other months, and you're basically asserting that the checks that you're selecting are indicative of the whole. That's the biggest flaw in evolution, is it's taking adaptation, which everybody's known for thousands of years. That's how we got certain kinds of crops like wheat and spelt and stuff like that. All right? We all know about adaptation. We depend on it. But you can't transcend adaptation, which is like 3 checks out of the whole, and say that, well, all life is explained that way. No, it's not. We know that things have boundaries. I can microwave a potato in 9 minutes, or I can bake it in an hour. That's a boundary. Newton's physics work just fine for certain levels of mass, but not beyond them. That's a boundary. So the same thing has to be said of evolution. It's really adaptation that you guys always give as your answer, proving evolution, right? It doesn't. All it does is you're just arguing adaptation in various forms, over and over and over again, like a broken record. That's 3 checks out of 100. What about or 4 checks out of 100? What about the other 96 checks? And what about the other months of the year? You're not accounting for that, so you don't have a theory. You have a hypothesis that's actually not particularly logical until you correct it by saying life, matter, and energy, and then it is finally a logical hypothesis. Okay, here's a solution to the problem of evolution, creationism, and ID. I've already written about this 6 years ago, and I'm making this video so that I don't have to answer this question in comments again. So look at the video description and see the web page. There are actually 2 of them. One is, the first one is short, and the second one says it's short, but it's long. The summary is this. For thousands of years prior to Darwin, it was universally understood by theists and non-theists alike that all reality was based on 3 elements. They gave different names to these elements, but in modern-day parlance, the 3 elements would be life, matter, and energy. Life was understood to act upon matter and energy. And what preoccupied the ancients was the definition of what life was. The theists among them would say that life is God or gods. The non-theists would call it a life force. Today's animism is pretty close to the non-theist version of the definition of life. Life is a force. It is immaterial. The greatest proof of life as a force, or just as its independent immaterial existence, is in math itself. Because math universally acts upon all matter and all energy in substantially the same ways. Whether you're looking at cosmology, biology, physics, economics, it's always a uniting of opposites that creates a circle. I did my divine physics videos on that, so you can look at that. The Greek term for this uniting of opposites is called hypostasis, and in ancient Greek, that meant reality. It is used as a moniker for Christ in the book of Hebrews. In Hebrews, 1:3, 3:14, and 11:1. It's always mistranslated. The point is that the ancients were preoccupied with these same questions, and they resolved it by simply saying life, matter, energy. So that's what would solve this current dilemma between the evolutionists who erroneously think that evolution proves God doesn't exist, and those who are propounding intelligent design, which really isn't saying that God exists either. It's just saying that there's a kind of intelligence to it. And then, of course, the creationists can say that life is God, so whoopee. Everybody is happy. Now, what that's going to end up doing, and I talked about that in the webpage already, is that evolution seriously needs some retooling. It is a marginal line now. It has outlived its usefulness. It was never right to start with because it eliminated the third element, which is life, from the construct, and just said, oh, there's matter and energy, and it just magically appeared on its own, and just magically somehow animacy comes out of inanimacy. Well, that's stupid. And they did that because Darwin, who was a disgruntled clergyman to start with, wanted to say that there was no God, and so he abused adaptation to come up with the idea that man came from monkeys. That's in his Descent of Man. I didn't make that up. That's where I learned it. So you can do that if you want, but it's not good science. To make it good science, but stay away from the God question, just do what the ancients did. Call it life, matter, energy. And then you don't have to use God words in the classroom. Just call it life. And you got math to support it. It's immaterial, obviously. Acts on matter and energy, obviously, everywhere you look. And then when you start making your arguments about adaptation transcending to evolution, well, there's going to be some logic to it, finally. Because life is the biggest data set, the biggest attribute set. And, science is still figuring out what life is. That's what you can say in the classroom. That will get the creationists off your back. Now, should ID be taught in the schools? I don't know enough about it. The schools ought to decide. There shouldn't be a federal law requiring evolution be taught in the schools. There is a law in the books. Mine was the first generation subject to it under Eisenhower. That law ought to be taken off. Let the schools decide whether they're going to teach it or not. There's no problem if they do, but for all of you guys who are in the science community, you're being really dishonest to not allow dissenting opinion. You're being like Pharisees. It's a religion now. Just like Carl Jung predicted, 50 plus years ago. Science is the new religion, yeah. And you're wrecking our kids because they're spouting it like a religion. Because they're taught it like a religion. It's dogmatically true that evolution happened. We came from. And then you got that wonderful picture of the chimpanzee slowly walking upright that everybody knows. That's disgusting. Just say life, matter, and energy. And here's a hypothesis we'll call evolution. It is not proven. But if you have life, matter, and energy as the three basic elements, then it is finally logical. And you can teach it. And you can believe it if you want. And the schools can decide whether they want to present opposing views. I'm not personally in favor of creationism being taught in schools, because once you introduce that idea, where do you draw the line? If we're going to talk creationism, then don't you have to bring up every single idea of creationism in order to teach the subject properly? So that ought to be, somewhere else. In the home. Otherwise you're going to have parents up in arms because the Muslim idea of creationism is not taught or is taught, etc.